Welcome back. I'm the Book Guy, and I'm very excited to talk to you today about a sci-fi series that you've probably never heard of before. This is the Common Trilogy, a space opera about a super soldier who's just come back from fighting a great war, but instead of a hero's welcome, he finds a society that rejects him. Now he lives in the underbelly, fighting off his addiction to his own super soldier serum. This was such a good story because it's quite different to normal sci-fi. In my opinion, most people go to sci-fi because they're expecting either lots of scientific and tech jargon or non-stop action scenes. And there's nothing wrong with either of those. You might think that because these books have a super soldier in it, it's going to be all about a one-man army kicking everyone's butt. Instead, this is a much deeper, character-driven story about grief, trauma, veterans, and drug abuse. It's a genuinely emotional story that's very well handled. There is still plenty of sci-fi world building and some big action scenes, but this is primarily a character story.
Suffering builds character!
Before we dive in, I do want to give some context. The author, Jeremy Szal, is a traditionally published author, so this is not an indie author. However, getting traditionally published does not automatically make you rich and famous. Jeremy is very much a mid-tier author in terms of popularity, which is where the majority of trad authors sit, by the way. Jeremy actually approached me about 2 years ago. However, the book sat on my shelf for 2 years because I liked them so much I wanted to wait until the third and final book came out and give the series its own specialized video. Yes, book 3, Wolfskin, literally just come out today, the very day this video has been posted. How cool is that? So this series has finished with a mighty crescendo. Now is the perfect time to pick up and try a new trilogy and support a lesser known author. So let's look at these books. Now, I wholeheartedly endorse this trilogy, but I'm still going to be objective and mention both strengths and weaknesses to give you a fair review. I will do it all spoiler free, and I want to help you decide if this is something you want to try for yourself. The war is over. All of humanity faced destruction by the evil harvesters.
Oh man, I hate those guys.
Yet our greatest weapon in this war was the Storm Tech, a super soldier serum made from the DNA of an extinct alien race. This untested drug was pumped into soldiers, turning them into Reapers, and unlocking a berserker state that turned the tide of battle. These Reapers sacrificed their lives, their bodies, even their sanity to save humanity. Now, Reapers are an unwanted problem that no one wants to deal with. These soldiers returning from the front lines are like ticking time bombs that could explode into rage at any second. No one wants them around. Payoff Fukasawa is a former Reaper still fighting the storm tech that rages through his veins. He now works as a smuggler since no one will give him a real job. He tries to make a new life for himself while holding back his inner demons. Yet a government agent approaches him for help. Someone is killing off Reapers, and evidence suggests that Payoff's estranged brother, Artyom, is involved somehow. Payoff becomes a consultant on this case. The only question is, who really deserves his loyalty? The government who pumped him full of drugs and then abandoned him? Or his brother, who wants nothing to do with the Reaper? But he will have to survive the storm tech long enough to find out. The whole aesthetic for this world focuses on a criminal underbelly. I love it. So many sci-fi books focus on leadership, the glorious emperors on their thrones or admirals in charge of space fleets, and our protagonist is usually the most important person in the universe.
He is the chosen one. You must see it.
Yet this story is gritty, looking at crime and drug dealers on the street, and our protagonist is a nobody from nowhere. The aesthetic is much more original. It's not quite Breaking Bad in space, but I guess there is some overlap. The first book in particular shows a lot of seedy bars and drug dens and homeless addicts living on the streets and government-run health clinics for the broken and unwanted of society. This is rock bottom of a mega city. It's the side of sci-fi that we don't see very often. I can only think of a few examples.
You wanna buy some death sticks?
Now, I want to emphasize that this story has a lot of soft world building. Now, normally sci-fi books, yes, they go to great lengths to create a whole vast society, but this is a more focused, character-driven story, so the world is not especially hard on the details. I won't lie, there were a few times during books 1 and 2 where I was really dying for more information on the whole wider world, and we do finally see a lot of that in book 3. Essentially, every book in the series expands the world building further than the one before, but for much of the series, the world building just takes a back seat to the much more important character work. Much of this story takes place within the government of Harmony and on a single mega city on an asteroid. We do get a sense of the wider galactic community out there, and there are multiple alien races we see from time to time. So think of it like watching a Star Wars movie, because unless you're reading all that extended lore, you just see cool looking aliens and new technology without much explanation. It adds a lot of clever ideas to the story without bogging it down with details. Now, Harmony is the governing body for all of humanity, and they're the ones who pumped all these soldiers filled with alien DNA, then abandoned them after the war. Yet despite this, we also see many good people working for Harmony who are trying to help. So the government has all sorts of shades of grey and brings a lot of nuance to the story. Sometimes you really hate them, and sometimes you begrudgingly respect them too. Now, one of the major world-building mysteries is the Storm Tech. We know nothing about this alien DNA. No research was done before they put it inside all of these people. What's the deal with this alien race, and why did they go extinct? Something's definitely off here. One last detail is that Vakov's Storm Tech functions a lot like a soft magic system. Again, this is a character-focused story, so it goes a bit light on the sci-fi details, but I will say the Storm Tech doesn't really give him super strength so much as it makes him go crazy with rage and adrenaline. Reapers usually wear super suits and wield weapons, and that's what does the physical damage, but it's the Storm Tech that's their fuel and their motivation for the battle. Yet for me, I was most intrigued by how the Storm Tech fueled the character. I just loved the main character of Vakov Fukasawa. He's a character that might go bad. He's filled with darkness, PTSD, and grief, and rage. Plus, he's got this drug in his body that pumps him full of adrenaline at very inopportune times. I love characters that might turn evil. In fact, I see a lot of protagonists in books that we're supposed to believe they might turn evil, but no one's really buying it. They're just edgy and brooding characters. But I like when a character has so much genuine uncertainty about them that the audience is truly unsure which way they're gonna go. And we have this wonderful character tension. So Vakov is a good man who has experienced so much darkness. There's a lot of childhood trauma and war trauma. Then he's a social outcast and a drug addict. There are so many compelling problems that drag him down and make his characterization unpredictable. So he's just a major highlight of the whole series. Our secondary main character is Grim. So this guy's literally a harvester civilian. So you remember harvesters were the bad guys they just fought in that big war. Yes, Grim is an innocent civilian from that race, and now he's Vakov's only friend. This is just an amazing storyline. We have a former Reaper and a former harvester who end up being best friends because no one else in society accepts them. It's just brilliant writing. Grim is the much-needed comic relief of the story, where Vakov broods, Grim jokes around. Which is funny, because with a name like Grim, Anyway, so he's a hacker and a tech expert, and he helps Vakov with all of his smuggling jobs. He's the guy in the chair.
Can I be your guy in the chair?
What?
Seriously, picture these two friends as Frodo and Sam. It's that good. And just one other character I'll mention here is Vakov's brother, Artyom. Now, we don't know much about him because Vakov hasn't seen him in years. All we know is that he's most likely involved in all of this criminal activity. At the start of the series, he's less of a character and more of a goal for Vakov to save him. Yet it was a goal that I cared deeply about, and seeing his character explored over the course of the series was really fascinating. A final note on characters, this series just has an incredible amount of heart. It's meant to tug on your heartstrings and get you sympathizing with all the characters. So read this trilogy if you want all the feels. I honestly don't think I have a single critical thing to say about the characters here. We don't have superheroes or paragons or Mary Sues. These are broken, flawed human beings that felt very realistic and normal. So no notes. This was just very well done. Now, the plots are very different for each of the 3 books, so for now, let's just focus on book 1, Stormblood. So we have 3 plot lines in this book. The first is in the present day, when Vakov is working with the Harmony agent Catherine to solve the case of who is killing off Reapers. Vakov is also trying to reconnect with his brother Artyom and protect his best friend Grim, all while fighting the rage burning inside of him. However, our other 2 plot lines both occur in the past as flashbacks. So the first is the more recent past, where Vakov was a Reaper during the Harvester War. So this plotline just has a crazy amount of action with all the blood and guts and glory. The real focus of this plotline is seeing all the friends Vakov had in his team during the war. This is a real band of brothers type storyline, and it's about as tragic as you would expect. The third plotline is in the far distant past with Vakov's childhood, growing up alongside his brother Artyom on a distant planet. They lived in a small backwater village with their mother and sister and their very dangerous father, and we see how close these 2 brothers used to be. Now, I actually really loved how these flashbacks worked together. We see how Vakov in the present is still carrying all the scars of things that happened during the war and during his childhood. This is a really nuanced depiction of grief and trauma, showing how it comes from multiple sources at once. It adds so many layers of complexity to Vakov's characterization. My only qualm is that we already know up front how each of these flashback plot lines are going to end. In the present day, we already know what's going to happen at the end of the war and at the end of Vakov's childhood. So these plot lines serve more as giving context for him and his character rather than a new story. Personally, I would have liked if the end of those flashback plot lines had remained unclear. That way, each of them would build up to their own respective climax at 3 different points. A bit like the Stormlight Archive flashbacks, where they build up to a revelation. But even so, I still think that the flashback sequences were very effective at building Vakov's characterization and adding many layers of depth to his present conflict. Now, a big focus of book 1 is the mystery and investigation plotline. This moves through the criminal underbelly of Harmony and encounters gangs and cults. Although honestly, I had another critique here, unfortunately. I thought the mystery plotline was slightly anticlimactic, just because it didn't build up to a big revelation like you normally get in crime stories. It was less of a whodunit, and more about just discovering what was going on. You know, who are these bad guys, why are they targeting Reapers, and what do they know about the DNA? So the storyline progressed instead of doing a big plot twist, which is probably fine. Not every mystery needs a plot twist. This is probably just a personal preference thing here. You let me know if I'm out of line here. Still, let's look further into the series and we'll keep this spoiler free. So every book in this trilogy expands on the one before in every way. So Stormblood is very focused on Vakov's character, whereas book 2 expands this focus to start developing the side characters and even introducing new ones. So Vakov is now working with a misfit crew of aliens, bounty hunters, and hackers. Now Vakov is still very much the focus, but this time his arc is all about needing to accept help again, maybe even find new people to trust, like he trusted his old team during the war. It was a great arc that showed natural growth for his character. The world also expands a lot more in book 2. It's no longer just the underbelly. We now see glimpses of the leadership of Harmony. We meet members of other alien races, learn about their culture, and we get a greater sense of the culture of the wider intergalactic community. And the plot expands too. Yes, it really does progress from here. There's a new danger to Harmony, and citizens are getting restless. People are becoming terrified of Reapers and blaming them for every bad thing that happens. Vakov and his crew have to stop the threat before civil unrest leads to anarchy. Book 2 also drops the flashback plot line, so now we have a bit more action in the present day. But most importantly, I love that despite the whole world and plot and characters expanding, it still feels like the same story. It's still centered on Vakov and his personal journey of recovery. This is even more accurate for the third book. So full disclosure, I did request an advanced ARC copy of the third book, which is why I don't have a physical copy of it just yet. But this book blew my socks off. It was just my favorite out of the three. So keeping it spoiler free, of course, but the book moves into open conflict. War is now spread across the galaxy and whole worlds are burning. So this book really delivers on the promise of violence that we've been seeing since the beginning. This time, the plot is bigger. We travel many worlds and we see all the full mysteries revealed at last. Yet even now, this still remains Vakov's story. His heart, his mental health, and his character arc is always at the center of this piece. I was genuinely awed by how much a third and very different book still managed to explore all the same themes as the others. Each book in the trilogy is so different, yet feels so connected. Sadly, I can't say much about book 3 without spoilers, but I do just want to emphasize how much this book was a payoff for all the story threads so far. The book rewards you for sticking with it. When we get big action scenes and victories, they feel so earned, because we saw the struggle through the first 2 books to get to that point. Every achievement in this book had to be worked for. Vakov has struggled for everything. I mean, he's not some chosen one, he's not some rich kid who was born into power and privilege, he's just a regular guy. So there was a lot of satisfaction in book 3 of this trilogy. The major focus and theme of this trilogy is mental health. So there's a lot of heavy content here. Grief, survivor's guilt, child abuse, drug abuse, suicidal ideation, and all of these things play a huge role in the story. For anyone who's gone through this type of thing, this story is going to resonate hard. It felt real, believable, lived in. I mean, I won't lie, I think there are a few times where it probably crept slightly towards the melodramatic, being a little bit over intense, but the majority of the time, this was a fantastic deep dive into writing mental health. It's worth noting too, there are many themes of prejudice. So we see people mistrusting the Reapers, the Harvesters, and prejudice against aliens, which I think is called xenophobia. There's even a bit of social commentary around veterans, how we might thank them for their service, but then make it nearly impossible for them to live normal lives. This series is tackling some very real issues, and I felt like it handled them very well with accuracy, maturity, and wisdom. As for the content warning, there's a lot of violence in the series, like a lot. The scenes with war show a lot of war crimes and atrocities, specifically the torture of prisoners. It's common practice to see soldiers crucified and burnt at the stake, so it's that level of graphic violence. There's a lot of depictions on drug abuse and suicidal thoughts. That's a major part across all of the books. There's a lot of swearing, and there is exactly one sex scene in the 3rd book, although it's very light on the spice level and very short. Is the ending worth it? Yes! This is an easy one today. This trilogy offers a great ending. Plus, the 3rd book holds so much of the payoff for the whole series, so it was definitely the strongest of the 3 in my opinion. And how much should you try? So look, I think the first book is definitely great, and it's written to about the same quality as books 2 and 3. However, I think because it's so much smaller in scope, you may find that you prefer the later books because of how they expand the world and the characters and the plot. And there's a lot more action in the later books too, okay? So all books have the same quality, but they have very different content. So you may need to read beyond book 1 to get more of the content that you really want out of this trilogy, depending on your tastes. So that's all from me. I hope I've convinced you to try out this trilogy. If you want to check it out, I put a link to the author's website in the description below. So good luck and happy reading. And thanks for watching. Guys, if you want to support my work, you can check out my own books, The Immortal Investigations, an urban fantasy series with monsters, magic, and mystery. You can also check out my shop, Rainbow Space Unicorn, and my Patreon. All of those will help me keep doing what I do. Make sure you subscribe for more very thorough book reviews like this one, and let me know your thoughts on the Common Trilogy. Has it caught your attention? Do you want to try it out? And are there other books you would like to see me talk about? Otherwise, I will see you next time. I hope you enjoy a good book today. Bye!